Chris, thank you. By the way, let's start off with the fact that thank you for what you did last Saturday for St. Jude. Remarkable man. Great focus on supporting St. Jude and the work that you do. And also, I have to ask you this question. Do you have any other shirts other than old Hawaiian vintage shirts? Every time I see you, you can tell. Let me just say this. Kids out there, you know when a man is successful when he just wears whatever the hell he wants to wear. And that is you, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, I am at the phase in my life, whether it's success or just getting old enough, that I've decided I'm going to wear what I want to wear. People will decide what they're going to want to decide.
Yep.
But I learned a long time ago, it is the don't judge a book by its cover.
No.
Yeah.
What would be the title of your book if your name is on there? But then what would be the title?
Oh man. I can't believe I got away with all this. I don't know.
Well, the reason you're on is because we were talking at the St. Jude Gala, and I don't know how we got on the data centers. I guess because of your expertise in data centers. And I thought you'd be a great guy to have on, former COO of Vantage data centers. All of the alarm and the protests and the lighting the hair on fire, should we be concerned?
Well, I think there's areas, John, to be concerned. But I also think that they're reasonably addressable. And actually, there are a number of people who are doing large data centers and campuses and the rest of that are finding ways to address that already. And so sometimes I call it playing old tapes, sometimes people get it stuck in a rut on certain things and they play the old tapes because those are the ones that they're comfortable with. And so, original data center designs that were popular more than a decade ago used obnoxious amounts of water. They absolutely did. So there's a reason to be concerned about that. But there's, at the same time today, most of the newer designs don't. And there's reasons why some companies would still want to use those older designs, but that's where leadership and government should come in properly and say, we would welcome a data center, but we would welcome it under these circumstances, right? Versus just getting trampled on.
Joining us, Chris Yetman, the former COO of Vantage Data Center. I'm going to throw some numbers out there, and this is pretty shocking stuff. The amount of energy it takes. Here we go. You ready? By 2030, they're saying 30 gigawatt. And 30 gigawatt is what 25 to 30 million households use. Is that square?
It's actually low.
Oh, my God. So, and by the way, with data centers, we say data centers, we're just talking about the cloud. Oh, where's my contact? Where's my picture of my dog? Oh, it's in the cloud. It's the data center. It's a gigantic building that has just rows and rows and rows and rows of all of the either CPUs or GPUs, all there just running constantly 24 hours a day. So you're saying 30 gigawatts is low?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think the industry is probably not using terribly far from that today. And last year alone, I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't do research on this for a living, but because I work with a lot, you see and you hear a lot. I'm quite comfortable. Last year alone, the industry wrote contracts for certainly more than 10 gigawatts worth of new data centers. It'll take a number of years to finish building those, but this year they'll probably write another 10 plus gigawatts, and next year they'll write another 10 plus gigawatts. So it's not going to slow down necessarily anytime soon because the demand is that high.
Right. It takes about 18 to 30 months once you go through the whole permitting process and everything else to get them. Only one guy has set the world record, Elon Musk, who in 122 days built the Colossus data center. I mean, I don't know how he was able to do it, but he got that one done. So as it comes to the state of Washington, do you think Washington will be able to support that type of energy use?
Well, I think there's going to be some concerns around energy use, but there are also ways to resolve that, right, or get around it. So if you think about the data centers and actually, maybe if you want to think of it as a mild rebellion, right, where people are like, not in my backyard,
yes,
or, we have too many already. The things that they're mostly concerned about are going to be things like noise concerns, which I get that, water concerns, also get that, and power. And so, in terms of power, just give you a good example out in Grant County, right here in Washington, because you will find a bunch of data centers out there. They actually got, people are selling farmland over to the data center companies, and there's, probably close to a gigawatt worth of data centers sitting out near Quincy, Washington, and Wenatchee.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Because this is a county that didn't have a very big tax base. And there's different ways that you can actually say, how are we going to, as a government, for example, help that? Washington State gave a tax incentive for customers to put data centers there. There's a good reason for that, too, because all up and down the Columbia River, you have about, 8 dams. So all the power is hydro, which means it's already green. And, and so the trick is, you do that, and maybe you gave them a tax break. I understand that, but at the same time, they're still paying local property taxes. They're still paying, just like you mentioned in Virginia earlier. And so the standard of living in that space has increased as a result. And it wasn't really a huge tax burden on the state, other than, by the way, you didn't take in as much tax revenue, but that's okay because you offset a whole bunch of other costs that were there locally that, those are all good employers now.
And for the people there in Grant County, the downside for them?
Maybe a little less farmland that I think they already have still plenty of, to be honest with you. If you sell 1,000 acres, Washington's a big state. 1,000 acres is, I'm not saying people are selling 1,000 at a time. What I'm getting at is all the data centers collectively might take up about that much space.
Chris, Chris, did you see the story about the Kentucky family? Did you hear about this? The 26 million?
No.
I'll play it for you. Listen to this.
Listening to these cattle, what are they saying to you?
Stay and hold and feed a nation. If it's my way, I'll stay and hold and feed a nation. 26 million doesn't mean anything.
Some people might find it hard to understand how Delcia Bear can turn away a $26 million offer to buy some of her land until you spend a little time with her walking the dirt road she grew up on and in the house her daddy built.
They've had the farm for 200 years, and the data center people came along and offered her $26 million. She said no.
Oh, man. That's I don't know if I could.
Wait a minute. Hey, we started this conversation with the fact that you're at a point in your life you don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Fair enough, I guess. Right. But, that's, we got a lot, but 26 million is 26 million.
Yeah. Everybody's got a price. I got it. So I was looking in Loudoun County, that's in Northern Virginia. So they provide only 0.4 of a cent for services, but in return, they get $1 back with taxes. So they're giving tax breaks to people. They're raking in all this money. They're able to fund a whole bunch of stuff, schools, they pull all the money in. So it all works in. It's not like, the local radioactive dump site is setting up in somebody's backyard. This is not like...
No, there are so many more industries that would be harder to host than a data center. They're incredibly clean. I don't want to sound like overly apologetic, but really they don't, the water that people do use when they're using it, which again, there's ways to mitigate that we can talk about, but is for cooling, right? And what they do is they use evaporative cooling. And so the water is brought up, and yes, you could drain an aquifer if you're not careful, and it's used and evaporated to be able to create cooling for the data centers. You can create waterless designs that, help obviate the need for that. There's no chemical dumping, there's no, the noise is actually reasonably abatable. And just like if you zone correctly, you put these things into light industrial zones. So you're not necessarily putting them right into a neighborhood. And I've done a lot of data centers like where we did in Europe where they're packed tighter. They are literally in neighborhoods. That's difficult. But still even doable because you can put sound baffling in and everything else like that.
Yeah.
So, the challenge is going to be, it is sucking all the power out of the grid. And I get it, right? Because these things are very, very power hungry. Like you said, 30 gigawatts, right? And you think about what that looks like. But most of those larger data centers that are being created right now, they're doing something called behind the meter. And so what happens is they look for local access to large amounts of natural gas, just like any power plant would. They tap into that and they create a local power plant that runs on that natural gas, and then that feeds the data center. And so the data center actually acts like an island, and it doesn't necessarily have to draw from the grid.
Yeah. And I was seeing in Denmark, they take the heat that is created there and they send that out. They ship that out and use that again. That's something you and I just talked about briefly on last Saturday.
Yeah.
You said, well, there's an innovative way to actually, use some of the things that people are concerned with in a positive way. What was that thing we were chatting with on Saturday? You'd mentioned. Hey,
yes, they have heating districts, and so when you create, when you use things to take away heat, you have to transfer that heat to someplace else. Or if you have a furnace, for example, as part of a manufacturing process, what do you do with that waste heat? In their case, they actually create heating districts. It's not a U.S. thing, but one of the things we did talk about was if you were generating local power, you could use a turbine. And so it's literally like a jet engine that you would see on a jet, but instead it's a 50 megawatt generator.
Yeah.
And so it just runs that generator. But those exhausts are very, very hot. And so what you do is you actually take that exhaust heat and you run that through another heat exchanger and you use it to boil water, which then can actually create a boiler situation to run another turbine. Or to help you run your air conditioning.
Closed system.
Yeah. So the idea is to make the whole system as efficient as possible when you do that.
Yeah.
And those technologies are entirely possible. And, I think the opportunity that gets largely missed, and Loudon gets that. Texas is actually doing a lot of work in that space too. And they will eventually, by the way, mark my words, be bigger than Virginia when it comes to the numbers of data centers. But, you can actually say, okay, if you want to use water, what we're going to make you do instead is work with all of the local farmland and everything else like that and force them to do things like, force the data centers, for example, to pay for upgrades to the farm system to do drip irrigation and other things like that. So it's like, if you're going to use water for this, help us save water over here to offset that, right? And those things are entirely possible to manage.
I think that is obviously the smarter way to innovate rather than to just close down. The state of Maine now, no data centers. There will be no data centers in Maine. Now, I realize it's, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 people to build the data centers. It only takes about 50 to 100 people to actually run it. So it's not like you can have a big employer base, but you could generate revenue. So Maine said no. I don't know what Washington will end up doing with this, but now I feel guilty because I was using chat today on the plane flying back from New York. And I realized, like, if I use Google, it's like a little bit. But if I use chat for some dumb thing like, oh, how tall was Hank Aaron? Like, how much energy does that use, Chris? Tell me,
there's people who would argue that it uses about a glass of water just to ask ChatGPT something. So, but the interesting thing is, again, that's with more traditional designs. I think the newer designs are certainly a lot more efficient. But I would argue, and it's the same thing related to, say, even St. Jude type stuff, whatever else, artificial intelligence is going to continue on whether you like it or not.
Yes.
And people will gravitate towards it, which means the demand will not stop, which is why I was getting at the fact that 30 gigawatts is actually small.
Yeah.
And so the demand will keep going. They got to find a home someplace. The smarter thing to do is to work with it.
Yeah.
And you want that demand because here's a good example to me. I don't really care about a doll version of myself. I know a lot of people are having fun with the image creation, right? And they're like, give me a cutie doll or whatever I look like. I'm like, yeah, I don't want that. You know what I want? I want to be able to feed it all of the DNA and other information that is related to cancer research, and say, help me find a better cure. And these things that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Like, this is the stuff that AI is going to help us fix. And, I would hate the idea of slowing that down.
Lives saved, whether they're in old Hawaiian shirts or wherever they are. Chris, thank you for your time. Have a fabulous weekend. Demand calls that we check traffic. Thanks for your time.
Do the same. All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.